Welcome and thank you for tuning in to today's video. Right here I have the MPC Live Mark II, and connected to the MPC Live Mark II I have the Apollo UAD Volt 476p. I've been seeing these interfaces, and I have the very first generation of Apollo interfaces that came out, which was many years ago. It's not class compliant, so I'm not able to hook it up to my MPC, but that interface, I have nothing but good things to say about it. I enjoy the preamps. I enjoy the workflow of UAD, the plugins that they give us. It's just such an amazing interface. So of course, I want to try out these newer interfaces that are class compliant, which it means that it will allow me to expand my inputs and outputs of my MPC. This will work with any of the newer MPCs, MPC-1, MPC Live, MPC-X. Right here, this has 4 outputs and 4 inputs. Why would I want that? The reason why I want to expand my I/O is because if I want to use some guitar pedals or outboard gear, compressors, any type of effects pedals, you're able to send certain signal or kick, your snare, your sample, out of your physical outputs into or any type of effects pedal. Go ahead and process your sound, use it for sound designing, and bring it right back into your mix and have the sound process through some of the outboard gear. Now, you also have plugins, which will give you some flexibility, but I enjoy to expand and be able to collect certain sound devices that will enhance your sound as you process through it. Now, I'm going to go through real quick and just show the workflow that I have, or the signal flow that I have with this interface. I'm not going to show the screen of the MPC. There's not going to be a lot going on right here. Most of it is going to happen over here with the Volt. But real quick, again, this is a class compliant interface. So I hook it up to the MPC via USB, and in the settings of the MPC, when I go into the audio device tab, I'm able to select my audio device and select the interface that I have hooked up to the MPC. And once I do that, all my inputs and outputs within the MPC is reflecting the interface that I have connected. So in this case, I have the UAD Volt. So I have now 4 inputs and 4 outputs to choose from when I'm working on my beats. So for an example, right here, I have a beat that I have called up with, which has my sample, my drums, and a bass synthesizer that I'm using as a plug-in instrument within the MPC. So now my sample is in stereo. So I'm coming out of outputs 3 and 4, which in the MPC, I'm telling it to bring my sample out of outputs 3 and 4, which in the back of this interface, you're going to see 3 and 4, and I'm coming right back into inputs 3 and 4 of the Apollo. I know it sounds kind of weird, right? Because I'm looping the inputs. This is where the Apollo Volt gets very interesting, and I'm able to use this Volt for some interesting sound designing without using any guitar pedals. And now I also have a drum break coming out of outputs 1 and 2. Again, that's going to be this cable right here, this red and blue cable, outputs 1 and 2. And I'm coming right back into inputs 1 and 2. Now, speaking about this part right here, this is a big downside of the UAD Volt that just kicked me off, and I was really turned down by this. It really just kicked me off. I don't like this about the Volt, and if I'm missing something in the manual, I looked everywhere. I tried to go through some manuals, but I did not find a solution for this. The Volt outputs or inputs 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, they're hardwired in stereo. So automatically they're going to be panned left and right. It's okay if you're using your sample, because I do want my sample to be panned left and right. But with my drums, they're not stereo, they're mono. I want my kick to come out of or to go into inputs 1 in mono, and my snare to go into inputs 2 in mono. But it does not work like that. It's going to pan it left and right. That is a huge turn down for me, because I don't want that. I want it to be in mono, but that to me just does not work. But I'm working around it so far. With that big downside, I'm going to go through and now I'm going to show you guys the good things about the Volt. Now, the reason why I'm looping this around, I'm coming out, let's actually start with a sample. If I'm going to solo my sample, right here, as you can see, you probably can't read, and I apologize for the bad angle right here of the camera, the lighting and all that, but this shows your outputs. So this is coming out, outputs 3 and 4. This is just my sample playing, and this is my inputs 3 and 4, because I'm bringing my sample back into inputs 3 and 4 within the Apollo. Now, if I want to monitor what's coming out of the Volt, the clean signal that's being sent out of the Volt, I can monitor the clean signal with these buttons right here. Right here, we have 4 buttons, 1, 2, 3, and 4. The first 2 bottom buttons is your clean outputs, your outputs 1 and 2, and then 3 and 4. So if I engage outputs 1 and 2, I will just listen to the clean signal coming out of outputs 1 and 2. If I engage outputs 3 and 4, I will listen to whatever signal I'm sending out of outputs 3 and 4 from the MPC. So if I engage that, I should hear the sample, because that's what I'm sending out of outputs 3 and 4. Now remember, that is a clean signal. There's no processing with compression or anything like that. Coming out of outputs 1 and 2, this is gonna be my drums, because I have my drums coming out of outputs 1 and 2. So if I hit play, I should hear my drums. Now with the inputs, this is where it gets really interesting. Coming back in now, I'm coming back in with the inputs. This is what's going on in the inputs. If I select these sources, it's going to monitor what I'm processing now with these inputs. As you can see, this Volt has a 76 compressor that I'm able to use. Have I used a real 76 compressor? I've never used one. I don't know how it sounds. And I've said this before, I can care less on how that sounds. My question is, do I like how these compressors sound that come with this interface? And yes, they do sound good, but you do not have a flexibility to set your threshold, your attack and release, but they sound very good. You got your first setting of compression is your vocal style compressor. So this might be like a slower style compressor, mainly for vocals, but you could use it for anything. If it sounds good, you could go ahead and leave it. And then you got your guitar compression. I guess this is a little more for guitars. And then you got your fast compressor, which will have a fast attack and fast release, which I find this to sound pretty interesting with drums. So if I turn this off, there's no compression and there's no vintage mode engaged. Let's go ahead and listen to inputs 1 and 2, which is my drums. Right now we're listening to the input. So whatever signal is coming through here. So if I engage this compressor, I'm gonna listen to the signal being compressed. I don't know if you can feel that being compressed a bit. I actually like how this sounds on the fast setting. If I want to engage this vintage mode, yeah, that smacks really, really nice. And I love how that sounds. Now, if I want to A/B and compare to the clean signal with no compression or no vintage mode compared to the process signal, I can go ahead and use these two settings. This is going to be the clean signal, and this is going to be the process signal. So I'm going to go from processed to clean so you guys can listen to the difference. Yeah, it's a big difference. Now, I know what you're probably thinking. It just probably sounds louder and you're being fooled by the gain staging. Yes and no. It is obviously being compressed. So when something is compressed, it's obviously going to sound like it has more presence. It sounds louder. But if you're watching the metering or the levels, it's matching pretty close, but it definitely does hit different and it has a harder hit. Now, one thing I did notice with this Volt is I'm able to crank up the gain. This is how you're gonna hit the compressor even harder if you wanted to sound more compressed. I'm able to hit the red. Like, distorting your meters does not sound bad if you're doing it with something like this. I'm obviously pushing it like crazy right now. This is a clean signal. This compression and the vintage mode does help out a lot with sound designing, and especially for drums. I was actually going through some of my old beats and just sending some of my drums through this setting right here and dialing in some settings right here. And I've been able to get some more punch from my drums, being able to compress them with the fast style compressor and a little bit of the vintage mode setting that I have right here. Not all of them sound good, but most of them have been smacking a lot more. This got like more of a richer tone versus me not using this rerouting setup. Now, if I go ahead and engage my inputs 1 and 2, which is my drums, and my inputs 3 and 4, which is going to be my instruments and my samples, I'll go ahead and listen to the whole beat. So even my sample, I'm processing it. Oh yeah. So that's a big difference from before and after. And if you guys are able to see meters, I'm actually seeing some meters right now. It does sound louder. And because it is being pushed, I'm using these preamps and I'm hitting them pretty hard. So it's being somewhat compressed. I mean, the drums are being compressed pretty hard. And the sample, I'm not using the compressor. I'm not using the vintage mode because I noticed that with my samples, when I use vintage mode, it could break apart pretty fast, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But in this beat, it didn't work. But the beat just sounds thicker. It sounds richer to me. Obviously, you're able to hear the before and after, and it's a night and day difference. Now, if I go into my bass, and if I solo my bass, this is the bass that I have. I'm actually using Mini D, and the preset that I have is Tap Funk. It sounds really nice, and I'm coming into inputs 3 and 4. If I use some of these settings, let's go into this vintage mode, and if I engage that, and if I go ahead and turn on the compression, you can hear what it's doing now with the vocal style compressor. There's a guitar style compressor. That's a fast compressor, but I think it sounds good with the vocal compressor for bass. If I crank it up, I'm gonna go ahead and really distort it. Turn off vintage mode. That's the clean mode. That's the process. Now, after going through the compressors and the vintage mode, the flexibility that you can do with this, you could obviously still come outputs 1 and 2, go into a guitar pedal, process your signal, come out of your guitar pedal and stereo, going into inputs 1 and 2. You got a little bit of your outboard gear. Plus, if you want to use the compression right here, you could use that. If you don't want to, you don't have to. This is still an awesome interface. With all that I just went over and showed you guys with the beautiful sound and how much thicker it sounds, with the whole stereo hardwire left and right situation that I had that I mentioned in the beginning, to me, is this worth it? For me, at least, I'm going to be speaking personally. I don't know. It's very tough. It's very tough because, again, like the way I work and the way I want to use my inputs and outputs, I prefer to have them in mono. Would this work for my workflow? Maybe not. I don't know. I'm still trying my best to figure this thing out and trying to see if there's a workaround this hardwire left and right. Again, if you guys know if I'm missing something, please let me know down in the comments, because if I'm able to do this monos inputs 1, 2, 3, 4, and select whether I want to do mono or stereo, that right there would be it for me. This would be 100% recommended. I would recommend it to everybody. I would be keeping this, but as of right now, I'm still in the middle. I'm not sure if it's going to be worth it for me. But if that's not a big issue for you and you're okay with stemming your sources like your drums in 1 and 2 and all your instrument or elements out of outputs 3 and 4, this is awesome. It definitely enhances your sound, and it definitely does something to the signal that you're putting out. Now, with all this being said, there is a video that I filmed a while ago. I never put it out. The reason why I never put this other video out is because I'm using this really nice setup with all my UAD guitar pedals, but I'm using it with my first generation Apollo interface, which has 8 inputs, 8 outputs, and I really have this like MPC on steroids. This thing is the best MPC ever, but I'm using it with my computer, using the console applications. Matter of fact, I'm going to leave a link to that video at the end. I didn't want to put it out because it was so confusing, and it's only going to resonate with those of you that had a first generation interface, which not everybody has those interfaces. And shoot, it was confusing for me to even rewatch the damn videos. So if anybody wants to see the video, I'll leave a link somewhere right here or at the end of this video, and go ahead and watch that video. I go through this crazy setup with the Apollo interface first generation. Guys, thank you so much for hanging out with me on this video. I hope you guys got some information from this. Thank you so much. You have a blessed day. I'll catch y'all on our next video. Peace.